But of course, if you're not in, you can't win. And here I am, having won £20,000, and that's tax-free. So I'm rather pleased I did it.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, it's 6 o'clock. You're watching Dewbs & Co with me, Emily Carver. I'm standing in for Michelle Dewberry this Monday. Labour trigger Operation Early Dawn. An emergency plan to free up prison space has now been activated as the criminal justice system creaks under the weight of recent arrests. But could some criminals walk free? And does Britain have a benefits blame culture? Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall says it's time to end the Tories' divisive rhetoric that blames people on welfare. Is she right? Plus, more than half of Brits believe Britain is moving in the wrong direction under the new Labour government. Just 22% believe we're moving in the right one. Could there be some buyer's remorse? And flags related to protest or hatred will be banned from this year's last night of the Proms. But what exactly is a hate flag, or indeed a protest flag? And what does this say about the state of our society? Well, stay with me. That's all to come in the next hour. So stay tuned to Dewbs & Co. I'm with you till 7 o'clock. But first, let's get the latest news headlines with Sophia.
Emily, thank you. Good evening from the GB newsroom. It's just gone 6 o'clock. Your top story this hour. One person has died and 6 are missing after a super yacht carrying British passengers sank off the coast of Sicily. The British-registered 56-metre Bayesian had 22 people on board when it went down after being struck by a tornado. The yacht's owned by the family of British tech entrepreneur Mike Lynch, who's believed to be among those unaccounted for. Divers are now combing the waters as search efforts continue around the wreck, 50 metres underwater. So far, 15 people have been rescued, including the wife of Mike Lynch and a 1-year-old girl. As we look at these pictures of the recovery effort, let's hear from meteorologist Jim Dale, who told us earlier the weather in the area was treacherous.
It was a danger zone, so I don't know what the situation was on this particular yacht, whether they had a meteorologist on board or anybody who was trained. But sometimes these things do occur, particularly this type of event. A water spout is quite unusual, so if it hit directly, then it would have been a little bit of a, let's just say, a catastrophic impact, and obviously has been.
Back in the UK, in Manchester, a 43-year-old woman has died and 2 are in a critical condition following a triple stabbing. A 22-year-old man believed to be known to the victims has been arrested on suspicion of murder. Greater Manchester Police are appealing for witnesses as they continue their investigation into what they say is an isolated incident. Meanwhile, there'll be no punishment for anyone handing zombie knives and machetes into police stations ahead of a new ban. Restrictions come in next month. The government stopped short of making ninja swords illegal, but insists that will happen soon. Policing Minister Dame Diana Johnson says the public should do the right thing and surrender any dangerous weapon. Prisons Minister Lord Timpson claims he's inherited a justice system in crisis as plans to address overcrowding in jails are activated in Northern England. Operation Early Dawn will see defendants who are remanded in custody waiting for a court appearance held in police cells for longer. It's separate to the early release scheme for some offenders, which kicks in next month too. Meanwhile, a young mother pushing a pram has become the latest defendant to appear in court after widespread rioting across the UK. 21-year-old Nevie Smith from Oldham will be sentenced in September for violent disorder outside an asylum hotel while she was pushing her child in a pram. And more than half of people think Britain's heading in the wrong direction as an opinion poll suggests a drop in support for the new Labour government. An equal percentage of adults have a favourable or unfavourable view of Sir Keir Starmer, with 38% on both sides. Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives' ratings, though, haven't changed since the election. The Tories' Deputy Chairman Matthew Vickers has resigned. He stepped back from the role to support Robert Jenrick as the next Conservative leader. He says Jenrick is the standout candidate with a compelling vision for rebuilding the party. The Prime Minister insists support for Ukraine is unwavering after Volodymyr Zelensky suggested that UK backing for aid is slowing down. It comes after Ukrainian forces destroyed a second bridge in the Kursk region as forces continue their incursion into Russian territory. It's thought the move's aimed at creating a buffer zone between the two countries. During an overnight address, the Ukrainian president praised his troops' efforts and also called for the removal of restrictions on donated weapons used against Russia. And the Democratic National Convention kicks off in Chicago later today, where Kamala Harris will be officially announced as the party's nominee for the US presidential election. Last month, Donald Trump was confirmed as the Republicans' pick just a few days after he survived an assassination attempt. Americans will head to the polls in November. Our US correspondent, Steve Edgington, is in Washington, D.C. for us. He says the DNC will be a critical test for the party.
This is unprecedented. There has been Democratic primaries or votes for their candidacy for the last, few decades. And this time around, Kamala Harris has not won any Democratic primaries. She's been installed as the candidate by essentially President Biden and Barack Obama. So this is a real key test for the Democrats. She's almost certainly going to get the candidacy. And she's also chosen her vice president nominee, Tim Walz.
Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler. More in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, welcome to Dewbs & Co this evening with me, Emily Carver. I'm standing in for Michelle this Monday. Now, joining me until 7 is my panel, Alex Dean, Conservative commentator, and Dr. Lee Jones, Professor of Political Economy and International Relations. Thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening. Now, as always, as Dewbs always says, this show is about you, so get your views in. gbnews.com/your say is the way to get in touch. Lots of you already are getting in touch, particularly about this Operation Early Dawn. It's something we've seen before, but it's being resurrected very much in the light of all these arrests due to the violent disorder. So we're going to get straight stuck into that one. So Labour triggered Operation Early Dawn. This is an emergency measure to essentially avoid prison overcrowding, as hundreds of people involved in the recent violent disorder are fast-tracked through the criminal justice system. So this will lead to defendants charged with a crime and waiting for a court appearance to be held in police cells rather than prison cells, or bailed until a prison space is made available somehow. But is this the right approach? And could we actually, as a result of this, see fewer criminals arrested if, instead of prison cells being used, police cells are being used with suspects? Then what happens if there are further arrests? Where are all these people going to go? And should Labour, politically, be adopting a Tory plan they previously criticised? This has been done before under the Conservatives. So let's get the views of my wonderful panel. well. Alex, can you help us make sense of what's happening here? Is this a direct response to the huge numbers of arrests we've seen with relation to the violent disorder and the like?
In the immediate term, yes. Unambiguously, it's because we're arresting hundreds of people in one go. Interestingly, the government models how often people are going to be arrested at what times, and August tends to... So crime is always with us, but is seasonal, and August is supposedly a time when fewer crimes, proportionately, or at least fewer people are caught committing crimes, and this year there's been many more of them. That has a knock-on effect throughout the whole system, and so immediately, yes, it is about the riots. In the longer term, it's because we haven't been building new prisons and haven't been extending existing prisons at anything like the extent to which anyone responsible for the prison estate has been warning for some time we needed to. So whilst, yes, in the immediate term it's about the riots, in the medium and long term, going back indeed year after year, the prison system has been under significant strain. I mean, I stopped practising at the criminal bar 2009 and this was already an issue.
And do you think it's right that those who were involved in the violent disorder, be that online or offline in real life, have been fast-tracked in this way?
I don't know about the online part, but in the riot parts, in civil disorder, in unrest on our streets, society coming apart at the seams with people openly defying any basic notion of social norm or law and order. Yes, absolutely, I think. You know, when it comes to riot, government has to deal with it immediately and demonstrate that it won't, and differently, and demonstrate that it won't continue. And I'm talking a lot, so just say one other thing.
Yeah.
It would be a bit rich of any Conservative, as I am, to make too much of this, given that it's precisely what the Operation Early Dawn, it's precisely what the Conservative Party said we were likely to have to do this summer as well.
Yes, this is a long-standing problem, no doubt. Lee, do you share that assessment, just initially, that the reason we're in this situation is because there's been a huge number of arrests, particularly in the north of England, but in other areas of the country, across the country, really, and that's put a massive strain on resources, and essentially we're having to now ration prison cells?
Well, there's a particularly acute problem arising from the riots, like Alex says, but even were the riots not to happen, the prisons are bursting. They're bursting at the seams. So they're massively overcrowded. And as of Friday, in England and Wales, in total, there were only 1,300 places left in prisons. So, and they had about another 330, 340 people arriving for incarceration at the end of the week. So the prison system is already bursting at the seams. So even without the riots, there's no doubt that whatever party was in government at the moment would have to be doing early prisoner releases and probably activating this Operation Early Dawn, which was already activated back in May, I think. So, as Alex says, the problem is we've got, by sort of European standards, quite a punitive justice system that likes to put quite a lot of people in prison, rather than, for example, community sentencing, which is used more frequently in places like the Netherlands and the Scandinavian countries. But then we don't invest in prisons.
But is that really true? Because there were some shocking statistics that were revealed from Neil O'Brien, a Conservative MP, and he did an FOI with the Ministry of Justice, and he found for some crimes, such as burglary, assault of police officers, you have to have multiple convictions of the same type of crime in order to spend any time in jail. You've also got, at the same time, shocking statistics about the number of crimes that are ever actually solved in this country by the police, down to 5.5%. I mean, can we really talk about being tough on crime when those statistics are there for everyone to see?
The question is, what does tough on crime mean? I mean, is it effective in suppressing crime? No. But do we have a system that incarcerates people at a higher rate than some of the European countries? Yes, we do. We have a system that's very bad at punishment. Partly, people are not being sent into prison because judges know that the prisons are full. So they'll try to do anything they can to avoid compounding this problem. We're also very bad at punishment, and we're extremely bad at rehabilitation in this country.
So those are two different debates, the one that you were just rehearsing into one. The first is how we treat people once they're caught, prosecuted and convicted. And the second, perhaps more important for the general public, is whether people are caught in the first place.
Yes.
And no amount of punitive treatment of those who are caught and convicted will ever deter someone if they think they won't get caught in the first place. place. Indeed, this is now circular, actually, because that's part of why it's so important to deal with riots in the way that the government is. Because people will have conducted themselves in the way we've seen on the streets of Britain, smashing stuff up, setting fire to buildings, and so forth, in part because they thought nothing would ever happen to them. They thought there were so many of us, it's going to be so hard to identify, it's going to be so hard to catch us, that we can do what we like. And it's actually a very important message to send that that's not true.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that concerns, I think it's now the top 2 issue in this country for people when they're surveyed about what they care about. Immigration and crime are unsurprisingly very high, 1 and 2, as a result maybe, or, you know, in the same context as these riots and things, it's brought all these issues to the forefront, the crime. But do you worry that people look at how things are working right now and you see arrests made relating to the violent disorder go straight through the criminal justice system? You see people banged up, yes, some for Facebook posts, yes, for very inflammatory and sometimes racist Facebook posts that actually call for violence, but Facebook posts nonetheless. You see that, and you see people who've thrown bricks at the police go straight into a prison cell. Quick justice. Why can't we have that for every crime?
I suspect a lot of people will feel that way. I mean, I think Alex is right that the government probably has no choice but to act very harshly against the rioters, because if they don't, it will be seen that you can basically do what you'd like with impunity, and then the police would be overrun. But to come down particularly harshly on the rioters, a lot of people will be saying, well, what about the problems that, you know, I'm far away from any of these riots, right? They're very localised, they're very distressing to people caught up in them, but they're very localised. Whereas for lots of people, there are crimes that are plaguing their communities, like burglary, for example. So the latest statistics on burglary are that in the past
depress us more.
In the past 3 years, the police have failed to solve a single burglary in 48% of areas.
I mean,
where
that is
statistics were
appalling.
gathered. So less than 1 in 25 burglaries result in a charge. And so lots of people will be asking that question, you know, why can't you come down harsh on the crimes that are affecting us in our communities?
Yeah, and it does start with antisocial behaviour. If the police don't turn up for basic antisocial behaviour issues, then the trust is gone and criminals become more and more, you know, emboldened, in my view. I think psychologically that must happen. Alex, I'm interested to know your thoughts. It was something that Martin was talking about. We heard from Keir Starmer, he's in Northern Ireland, and he was talking about some of the riots that happened over there, in Belfast in particular. He came out and he said, racist, thugs, essentially, and doubled down on that.
Yeah.
Do you think it is as clear-cut as that? Of course, we did see the most egregious examples of targeting of, for example, Muslim-owned businesses.
Yeah.
We saw some Muslim people's homes being targeted. But do you think he's lazy in not drawing, differentiating between those who go after, you know, individual Muslims and their businesses and this and that, and, you know, someone standing with a placard saying enough is enough, get immigration down?
I'm not in the business of defending rioting, and so I'm not going to demur from criticism of those who have been rioting. The difficulty for me isn't there, where people can have their own, you know, is it mindless thuggery? Is it people with no sense of responsibility to others anymore? Is it racism? You can put lots of different causes into the people who actually go out, throw bricks, set fire to stuff. None of they're indefensible in my view. The trouble for me isn't that. The trouble for me is it seems to elide between those who are violent and those who were not violent, who went because they wanted to demonstrate their deep concern about our country and its condition and took part in peaceful protests. And the enthusiasm for which the post appalling events Southport, the enthusiasm for which this government has just criticised everyone when they were at pains during and after Black Lives Matter and at pains after George Floyd to say largely peaceful, mostly OK, fringe lunatics, fringe unpleasantness.
People see that. People see that. I mean, Lee, do you think that Keir Starmer should try more to differentiate the sort of racist actions of a small minority of people with other people who might turn up to a protest about illegal migration? Or do you see them all as being the same thing?
Well, I don't think it's just about Keir Starmer. I think the extent to which the sort of ruling elite and the commentariat have sort of closed ranks around this issue and done exactly what you're talking about is that they don't want to solve the underlying issues, or they find it too sensitive to talk about the underlying issues, where these riots are just the tip of the iceberg.
Seems
I think.
cowardly.
Well, you can understand the reaction against the unrest because it was quite shocking and clearly, you know, I would say there's 3 different kinds of groups of people that were involved in the unrest, protests / riots, right? So there were undoubtedly far-right agitators who were stirring up trouble, and these people involve, you know, some of these people will be kind of crypto-fascists, Nazis, racists, etc., no doubt. The second group, I think, is just a kind of opportunistic, thuggish element that just likes to create mayhem and have a fight with the police.
Just joining in,
joining
basically.
Anyway. The third were, as Alex says, you know, people worried about the state of the country, the state of their communities, and a state, a ruling elite that has largely just abandoned them and is not listening to them anymore. And there's deep frustration. Now, only, you know, a few hundred people turned out in each town, but there's many more thousands, millions of people who broadly share that sentiment and want something done about these problems. And it's much easier for the political class to just say, all of these people are totally beyond the pale, so we don't have to talk about these issues.
And if we look past these immediate events, my concern is that you take all the concern about right concern about rioting and so forth, and you wind up instituting new laws which effectively say anyone who's concerned about migration, anyone who's concerned about boats coming from France, you're far right, you're racist. Right? That's the government overreach I'm worried about.
Well, it also doesn't chime with what the Labour government was saying in the run-up to the election.
Only a few short weeks ago.
Talked quite tough on illegal migration, if you can cast your mind back that far. Lots of you getting in touch. William says, if you want to free up prisons, stop jailing people for Facebook posts or tweets, deport all foreign criminals and arrest actual criminals like thieves and killers. That's William's solution. Colin says, when I got burgled, I rang the police and was given a crime number. Nothing else happened. No one came. Just a crime number for the insurance. I mean, that is just so depressing. I mean, I'm sure many of us have a similar experience. Michael says, so Joe Public suffering with crime rates, antisocial behaviour like we've never seen before. Starmer, the clown, he says, idea is let them out, knowing prisoners are 75% proven to go on and commit crimes within the first 2 years of being released. Fantastic logic. I don't know about that 75%, but I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case. And Stephen says, once again, the police to be used as prison officers to guard prisoners in unsuitable, overcrowded accommodation, leaving even fewer police on the street. Starmer's administration is a very expensive train crash. Well, there you go. John says prisons are too nice to be in. Well, there's a difference of opinion. They're overcrowded accommodation versus too nice to be in. Which one is it? All I know is that prison guards, I mean, I have a lot of admiration for them. It must be a very, very difficult job, considering all the violence and drugs and whatnot. Anyway, coming up, nearly half of you think Britain, or half of Brits, think Britain is moving in the wrong direction under Labour. What is the new Prime Minister doing wrong? Only 22% are happy with the direction of travel. We'll have more on that.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
EasyJet is launching a new recruitment drive focused on attracting cabin crew members over 50 and those even considering retirement.
Well, the initiative is called Returnships and is inspired by research that suggests that 75% of people over 50 years old believe that now is the ideal time to embark on a new career.
Joining us now to discuss what it takes to embark on a second career as cabin crew is Helen Williams. Good morning, Helen.
Hi, good morning, Helen.
Welcome. Just touching down in our studio.
It is. I've had a few days off and now I'm here.
So you are now cabin crew.
I am.
What inspired you to get into it? What did you do before? How did it all come around?
Oh, so when I graduated, I took an office job with my grad scheme, and that job lasted 6 months, and I started working for a European carrier. I did just over 5 years at that European carrier and had an absolutely fabulous time. I then went on to a wet lease operation with an Irish carrier and another mainline UK carrier. I then decided to have time out. I had a business, I had a family, I had children, and last autumn I decided, why not? Let's go back and do it all again. So returning to that European carrier that I'd worked at when I was in my early 20s.
And what is that like for you now, returning that bit older, having that life experience, having your children? Do you think that's been a benefit to you?
It's absolutely been a benefit. I mean, the amount of parents that thank me for helping me with their small children when they're crying on a flight. I am that person now.
When you went back for a second time, did you notice more sort of older people amongst your sort of colleagues?
I did. So when I returned onto my initial course in March of this year, just over half the course were over the age of 30.
Wow.
Which was absolutely phenomenal. And I was expecting to return and be with a lot of younger, 18, 19, 24. I was expecting to be that dinosaur. And that first day of training, to find out that I wasn't the dinosaur, you have no idea how exciting that was. And they've gone on, that particular group, to be phenomenal crew members.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m, followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain, followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Right, welcome back. It's 6:24. This is Dewbs & Co with me, Emily Carver. I'm standing in for Michelle this evening. Now, keeping me company until 7 o'clock is Alex Dean, Conservative commentator, and Dr Lee Jones, Professor of Political Economy and International Relations. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us. Now, this is, perhaps this won't surprise you at home, I'm not sure. Let us know what you think of this. More than half of Brits now think that the country is moving in the wrong direction under Labour. Just 22% say this country is moving in the right one. Now, the election campaign for the Labour Party was all about change. It was all about how awful the Conservatives' 14 years of failed government were for absolutely everything, from the economy to the NHS to crime to whatever else. That was what it was all about. But it looks like people aren't particularly happy now either. This is according to a new poll by Ipsos. Now, at the same time, popularity for the Prime Minister has plummeted. Just 38% of people are in favour of Sir Keir Starmer. So what's going on? Is Britain moving in the wrong direction? Is it fair to blame Sir Keir Starmer, who's only been in the job for, what, 6 weeks? About 6 weeks, something like that, maybe 7 weeks. So it's not a long time to judge him on. But, Alex, what do you think?
In the interest of fairness, look, he's entitled to have a go. He's Lord knows Labour won a majority at the election. Many Conservatives lost, myself included. So it's still early days. But this is reminiscent for me of nothing so much as Liz Truss in government. Too far, too fast, overreaching on issues that you think of as really ideological. And the totemic one for me on that is the strikes policy that Labour has announced and removing the requirement for 50% of union members to vote. And that just smacks of deep Labour ideological views, which was the opposite of what they tried to present going to the public.
On that, so, I genuinely thought they might rethink the private schools.
Yeah,
tax on private
instead
schools
they've doubled down.
When so many people came out and said, no, this is the wrong policy. It's not going to do what you want it to.
It's not actually about it's not about outcomes on the school one. It's about an ideological message and punishing people who are of a certain type or class as they see it. But look, the slip in opinion polling was likely to happen because he's the least popular leader of the opposition ever to have become Prime Minister. It's just that he was fighting an election against a government that was even more unpopular. He was very lucky in his opponent. So on the one hand, it was always going to be like this. On the other hand, it does seem to me the speed with which they've done things like botching the negotiations over strikes. OK, you have 22% pay rise. Oh, my gosh, other people want more. Who could have seen this coming?
Yeah.
You know, the speed of that is remarkable to me.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I think now the Tories have been saying Labour got absolutely played by these trade unions, particularly the train drivers. So they get offered their 15%. It sounds like they're going to take it. Immediately announce a new series of strikes on a different line, granted, but it is very much, you give an inch and they take a mile. And Labour fell into that trap, don't you think, Lee? No?
Well, I think, people are absolutely sick and tired of having public services paralysed by strikes, and something had to be done to try to settle it. But I also wanted to...
It's easy to settle an industrial dispute if you just say, oh, all right,
have what you want.
Well, in fact, they've not given the strikers what they want, because the demands, for example, among junior doctors are for much more substantial pay rises, and arguably they deserve it. They've not been given what they want. But what I wanted to do is to put your introduction on this polling into context. So I'm no particular fan of this government, as people might realise. But in terms of when you ask people, is the country moving in the wrong direction or is it moving in the right direction? Since April 2021, more people have felt it's moving in the wrong direction than the right direction. And the number of people polled saying the wrong direction has been hovering around 50% of the population for at least a year, and only about 20% think it's moving in the right direction. So this is not a staggering poll outcome. It's not really a reflection on Keir Starmer's
OK, well, hang on. We had a huge election where everyone was told that this was going to be the opportunity for change. You would have thought, if people were happy with the result, and they got the right result, and it was the government that they elected, that maybe that would shift.
I think that's a misunderstanding of the election that we've just had, because let's remember, only 20% of the citizens of this country actually voted for the Labour Party, right? And of them, when they were polled, you know, what's your reason for voting Labour? The top reason, 48% of them said it's to get rid of the Tories. 2% said they like their local MP, 1% was Keir Starmer's leadership, and 1% was they care about ordinary people. So this is a deeply unpopular government, and I think it will become less popular over time.
A huge majority, but a fragile one. Not that many people actually did vote Labour proportionately.
Agreed, but let's try a different question, which is why is it moving in the wrong direction and so quickly? Because I think it's very interesting with this government what they've done with all of the pay awards that we've been discussing. The Conservative Party and people on the right generally think that the Labour Party and people on the left generally are misguided, whereas they think we're evil. Right? So they've spent the time in opposition saying, oh, this government business, it's really easy. Just press the do right button and then it'll all be fixed. If you just press that, that's what we'll do when we get in. Then they get in and they find there isn't a do right button. They find, in fact, the government's quite complicated and difficult. And if you just give people what the unions wanted, which is all approximating what the unions wanted, or far further than the government wanted to, then it has all manner of effects that you weren't expecting, or should have been expecting, but weren't because you didn't think it through. And so I think we're going to have a long, hot, bad summer and autumn and winter where we get held to ransom by more and more of these unions. Whatever Lee thinks, I'm afraid, your question was right. These unions saw Keir Starmer coming a mile off.
I mean,
and we have got, you know, the GPs are going to ask for more. We've got the border force also threatening strike again. I believe that's already in the diary. You've got ASLEF again. I mean, who knows? The junior doctors may decide that, as you say, 22% isn't enough to agree on that one. I mean, it could spiral out of control, because if you give people a pay offer with no strings attached, which is what Keir Starmer has done with the ASLEF, with the train drivers there, then there's, you know, you've lost the bargaining power, haven't you, as a government?
I mean, I think most people believe that more money has to be spent on public services. In fact, you know, you talk about the Liz Truss government, for example. When Tory voters were polled, when Liz Truss was running to be Conservative leader, do you want more money to be spent on public services, or do you want tax cuts?
In theory, yes. It's
more people wanted either higher taxes or taxes to remain the same because they want better public services. So you're only talking a moment ago about people sense that things are broken, things are falling apart, the prisons are full, the police are not doing their job. If you don't invest in public services, and fundamentally that means investing in people, who is going to actually deliver these?
I just don't think when questions are posed in that way, with no sort of... when questions are posed in that way, you're obviously going to say yes.
Do the nice thing.
You're not going to say no one wants public services to be funded properly.
But hang on.
But also, a lot of people don't pay much tax in this country, so there's...
The flip side is, if you are going to give out pay awards like this, it has to come with the quid pro quo of improved productivity.
Exactly, yeah.
Because in our public sector, productivity is in the toilet. In fact, there's been no such guarantee or even attempt at that through these announcements and negotiations. So I'm afraid we are very likely to see much more of this, I think, under Labour and the unions. And the interesting comparison, we're all interested in history in different ways. Ted Heath went to the country in '74 when the unions were really powerhouse, and said, who runs Britain? And the electorate decisively said, not you, Ted. But, so the Labour Party were put back in. But it was still the right question. And when Thatcher came in 79, effectively asking the same things, it was because the unions had been so strong for so long against an ineffectual and unpopular Labour government. If we're looking for a precedent for what Keir Starmer's shaping up to be, for me, it's that.
I just think
we don't want union bosses to be running the country,
Union bosses running the country is an absolute
Well, it's looking
joke.
like it, isn't it? In many ways.
Union power is at an all-time historical
Doesn't look
low
like it.
in this country.
And they're going to make it easier to strike. That's what it's looking like, getting rid of that Trade Union Act.
So that
We may see
now
more.
don't need
We
over
may actually
50%.
see more strikes.
Yeah. So we now have a government in power that 20% of the citizenry voted for and has a 2/3 majority in Parliament. That's fine. But when a union wants to go on strike, you've got to have over 50% of members voting and a majority of strike
We all pay the wages, don't we?
We
We're
had a
public
vote.
service.
I voted for the alternative vote. We had a referendum on it, and my side lost. Right? And I accept the result of that vote. Whereas, because you were interested in polling amongst party members, today we see that YouGov, I think, was reporting a majority of Labour Party members think it's right for a union, in order to go on strike, should have a vote to have that strike, and a majority of their members should vote to go on strike before they do it.
Because it impacts the members of the unions as well. They may lose work, they may lose money as a result of these, and they may not want to go on strike. Not everyone who's a member of a union wants to strike all the time. Anyway, Jonathan says, well, look what Starmer has achieved in 6 weeks. Think what he can achieve in 5 years. Ponder that in the break, because coming up, do we have a broken benefit system, and will Labour be the ones to fix it? Do we need to be nicer about people who are on welfare? That's what Liz Kendall thinks.
Hello, very good evening to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Plenty of showers as we go through tomorrow and some blustery, gusty winds too. But before then, there's a lot of cloud, there's a lot of rain because of a frontal system that's already made its way in from the west. And as we go through the next 12 hours or so, it's going to continue to push east and southeastwards, bringing quite a wet story across many parts of England and Wales for a time, with that rain feeding into the southeast as we go through the early hours of tomorrow morning. Behind it, there will be some clear skies around, but also some showery bursts, especially across parts of Scotland. Temperatures not dropping a huge amount. In fact, in the southeast, it is going to be another warm night, some places only falling to lows of around 17 or 18 Celsius. As we go through tomorrow morning, though, there will be some hefty rain across the far east of Scotland and the Northern Isles. Also, plenty of showers feeding into western parts of Scotland. In between, something a little bit dry and brighter for some, but also more showers across Northern Ireland, some parts of northern, northwestern England, and in fact down the western side of England and Wales, there'll be some showers feeding in. Something a little bit drier and sunnier for more central eastern parts of England, although in the far southeast, that front will be lingering here for a time, so a grey, damp start to the day for some before that front clears away by the afternoon. Behind it, for many, it is going to be a showery day, and some of those showers will be heavy, and there are some gusty, blustery winds to watch out for too, especially in the northwest, making it feel a little bit cooler for some. But there will also be some sunny spells, and in the east-southeast, in the sunshine, feeling quite warm with temperatures in the low to mid-20s. Wednesday gets off to a fine start for many of us, but some very wet and windy weather is going to feed in from the northwest as we go through the day, particularly affecting Scotland and perhaps Northern Ireland too. Now, the rain is going to be quite heavy and will last as we go into Thursday, and it's all due to the remnants of what was Hurricane Ernesto, the other side of the Atlantic. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Problems in Murray to the west of Keith. A serious building fire has closed the A96 along Regent Street. On Merseyside on the M57, the northbound entry slip is closed at junction 5. You can't get off the motorway onto the East Lancashire Road, where one lane's closed on the main carriageway. A lorry's overturned just by the exit slip there. In Northamptonshire, north of Kettering, the A43 remains closed off the A14 following a serious accident. Long queues on the Essex stretch of the M25 clockwise. The outside lane still shut at the M11 for recovery work following an accident. In Cornwall, midway between St Austell and True Road, the A390 is blocked at Grandpound by an accident involving two vehicles. Transport for Wales trains are suspended between Maesteg and Bridgend due to a trespass incident, and trams are not running through Blackpool, Stargate to Pleasure Beach due to an ongoing engineering work. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
OK, well, welcome back. I'm standing in for Michelle Dewberry this evening for Dewbs & Co, keeping me company until 7 o'clock. Alex Dean, Conservative commentator, and Dr Lee Jones, Professor of Political Economy and International Relations. Thank you very much indeed. Now, we're going to turn to something a little bit different because the Work and Pensions Secretary, Liz Kendall, has spoken out. She's calling for an end to the so-called blame culture and also divisive rhetoric around benefits, or those on benefits, those claiming benefits, hitting out against the Conservatives. She pledged to end the salami slicing of the benefits bill as she trails or considers major reforms to the system. So do we have a bit of a benefits blame culture? I mean, Alex, I do remember years ago most of the front pages of the tabloids would be about, I don't know, a single mother who had 8 children and her benefits bill was more than the average train driver,
and of course,
or something.
That would have been before the 2 cap limit that this government has interestingly said it's 3 cap limit now. The government was going to keep, notwithstanding the views of many of its members of Parliament, that's why they've got 7 suspended members of the Labour Party at the moment in the new Parliament. Look, on the one hand, when we introduced universal benefits and said universal credit, and one of the big changes is that the state would periodically check in with people to see that they were still of the same condition and that their position hadn't changed so that they could return to work. Just announcing that was going to happen meant tens of thousands of people came off benefits because they started seeking work again and secured it. So signing people off work for life is bad it's bad for policy, it's bad for them, it's the soft bigotry of low expectations. Here's a little chip that says the state will look after you forever, go away and don't worry about anything. And I would hope we can agree on that policy, on that point, across left and right. The trouble is, it's very specific. We've had a benefit debate in this country for decades. We've now got an explosion of people on benefits post-COVID, and a very significant chunk of it is mental health related. And most people who are being signed off because of that reason are signed off indefinitely, right? And that's the problem. One, whether we treat mental health, and 2, saying that it's indefinite. And we've actually shown already how we can deal with it, which is checking in as a state to start with to make sure you're still of that position.
I mean, we've got a big problem here, don't we? We've got 9.5 million, or roughly thereabouts, people not working or not looking for work. So that's a huge chunk of our potential workforce of working age adults who simply aren't interested in working. Now, they may have enough money to last them for the rest of their lives, and they don't need to work, but that's a bit... Potentially, for some of those, that is a bit of an economic drain for us, or at least we could be getting some use out of them if we want to look at everything in economic terms. But add that to the 2.8 million people who are now out of work due to long-term sickness. Some of that will be mental health related. Some of that will be physical health. And then you've also got the number of children now on disability allowance for things like ADHD and anxiety through the roof, again, since the COVID lockdown. I mean, this is a recipe for disaster, isn't it?
Well, I'm not sure about the 9 million figure. The figure that I've heard is closer to 8 million, but...
9.5 is the figure that came out this week.
And that would include lots of people who, for example, are still at school, are university students, are carers for disabled or elderly people, or taking time to raise a family or so on. So I don't think it's very helpful to focus on the total number who were not economically active. The figure that does concern me is the 2.8 million people.
But it is when you've got lots of spaces in the labour market that aren't filled, and you're relying on very high migration levels in order to try and plug some of those gaps.
Those things are connected.
Housing issues and
those things are connected,
else.
but it's rather absurd to suggest that 9 million people are just living off their savings.
Hang on, no, I just said that some of them will be. Yeah, I didn't suggest that all of them will
Hardly any, basically. So the figure that we should be focusing on is the one that Alex has pointed out, which is 2.8 million people on long-term sickness, so described as unfit, unable to work, and that figure has risen by about 700,000 since 2019. After a long-term decline, it's shot up, and it's very persistent. And there's 2 big groups where this is happening. Firstly, among young people, there's been a very sharp rise among young people, under 24s, and then very large number of people over 55. And the 2 big things that are showing up is, one, mental health. That's showing up in 69% of workplace capability assessments, and musculoskeletal disorders, so people are just broken down by work. That's showing up in almost half. So I think this is part of a kind of long-term legacy of, first of all, treating people with difficulties as if they're ill, and putting them onto long-term disabilities. This is not a new problem. This is what happened with millions of people who were rendered unemployed by deindustrialisation in the 1980s. They were shifted onto incapacity payments.
So what exactly are you saying? Do you think too many of these people are on long-term sickness, are judged not fit to work? Do you think that there has been a culture of blaming people for being on benefits when it's not actually their fault?
I think it's a complex mixture of different things. So there are some people that are just facing a lot of difficulties in their life and are struggling to get on. And for young people, if you think about what they've been through, these are people that I'm in contact with a lot through my own work, right, my students. They've massively struggled in recent years. Like, the lockdowns were an absolute disaster for young people. It took a massive toll on their mental health. Their life prospects are pretty bleak at the moment in terms of underemployment of graduates, in terms of their job prospects, in terms of their ability to ever get onto the housing ladder and so on. We have had decades of therapeutic education that encourage people, yes, to recognise mental health difficulties, but also to frame everyday problems as mental health problems.
Yes.
Well, that's an interesting point.
We've had massive underinvestment in mental health services. So
it's
demand
interesting you
is
raised
going
that
through
point.
the roof.
Well, that's what I
and
was
supply of mental health services has absolutely collapsed.
But
It's interesting you say that, because this is something that a board member, a non-executive NHS England director, Professor Sir Simon Wesley,
yes.
He said that actually all of this awareness that we have all the time about mental health may not actually be beneficial.
Not necessarily always a good thing. It's very bad luck for Liz Kendall that she...
Sounds awful.
It's very bad luck for Liz Kendall that she's taken this position on benefits the same week that Professor Sir Simon Wesley, until recently President of the Royal College of Psychiatrists, who we think you know something about it, says that, yes, there's been this explosion in mental health issues. People report much higher rates of poor mental well-being and mental health problems. When you push into what that is and you dive into what the actual things are, they talk about things like concerns about loneliness, homesickness, stress, concerns about climate change, many things that you might think people need to be able to put up with as part of the warp and weft of everyday life. Or, as Sir Simon puts it, they're things that don't really respond to the kind of psychological treatments we're able to give people.
Also, these are just normal things that people experience.
So we are medicalising that which, as otherwise, as was being said, are part of the everyday challenges of life that we have to deal with. And when you go down the route of telling people that we want to explore awareness and we want you to talk about your mental health a great deal and have no issue about it. This is the flip side of the Kendall thing. She was saying we shouldn't feel any shame about talking about being sick or being on benefits, and that's all right, but it's not something to be go around boasting about either. And there are some younger people who think, well, if I haven't got a mental health condition to report at the moment, I'm pretty uncool, right? I need to have something that demonstrates I'm part of modern society and I'm in.
Yeah.
And what's in at the moment is having a mental health issue or having having bad mental well-being. I need to have an issue, and my anxiety is such that, and so forth. And so Simon frames his arguments in the context of the NHS not having the resources to look after all the people reporting things that wouldn't 2 years or 3 years ago have been a mental health problem. Let's look at it the other way around. Think about the people who could be happier, productive members of society, but now think they can't hold down a job because they're concerned about climate change or they're anxious. They're told you're sick.
They're told they're sick, yes, and they may wish to believe it, or they may not, but they may be pushed in that direction. But it is quite striking. I mean, it is staggering, these statistics that we saw just a few days ago that came out, official statistics, on the number of children or the parents of children that are claiming disability allowance for things like ADHD and also autism. Now, of course, autism, there's a massive spectrum, same with ADHD. But the surge since the lockdown, absolutely incredible. And the cost of that, of course, will balloon too. And, it's an absolutely huge burden on the taxpayer. I mean, Peter says some forget or don't know that benefits are paid by other taxpayers. Danny says too many people in this country will blame anyone they can think of for not getting benefits. There is work for these people. Melanie says, Emily, I'd much rather my taxes go to British people on benefits than those coming on the boats. Fair enough. Richard said, we must be the only country in the world where you can have £200,000 in the bank, £2,000 a month pension and still get benefits. Well, I don't know which benefits you're referring to, perhaps the state pension or the winter fuel allowance, although, of course, that's being scrapped quite a bit at least. And Anthony just says, abolish unemployment benefits, force them to work. Harsh, Anthony. I might see how that might work in practice if you're absolutely, got a disastrous, you've been in a disastrous car crash or something like this and can't physically work. But anyway, coming up, protest flags are banned from the last night of the Proms. What exactly does a protest flag mean? Also, flags of hate are also banned. That's as the BBC buckles down on rules at the classical music event. See those shortly.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
One local cricket team was made up entirely of one family, the Jollens.
The Newmarket midweek seconds played Thurlow and Old Mill Greenian seconds, captained by, here we go, James Jolland. He played alongside family members Henry, Freddie, George, Jack, Archie, Ryan, Brandon and Daniel. Even if slightly controversial, one of the umpires was a Jolland to Stephen the umpire.
Yes, well, the Jolland family mostly live in Wickenbrook in Suffolk and have played for 4 years. But Dullingham Village team before it merged with Newmarket. So that's the entire backstory. We're delighted to be joined now by Captain James Jolland and teammate and brother Nick Jolland. Really good to see you both this morning. This is incredible. How did you get the entire family involved in cricket?
Well, we started the club about 3 years ago, and it was more friends and family. But then it had this opportunity of this week to get everyone involved because everyone was back and they all played cricket, various levels, and the youngest being 12, George.
Oh.
And we were all available, so we thought 1 week we'd do the whole team.
You booted the friends out for 1 week only?
Yeah, they were very good about it.
Oh.
They come and watched. They supported us.
How did the other team feel about having an umpire with related ties?
Well, the captain of the Thurlow is one of our friends. We do know him, so he was fine with it, and there was no controversial decisions at all.
I think it's a fantastic strategy.
No, yeah.
You could plant somebody
That's the way
in a position of authority. It's a great idea.
Oh, look, here's the scorecard we can see on the screen with all of your names on there. Some fantastic English names on there. How does it get between the family members? Is it very, very competitive between you all?
As you get older, you work on that, don't you? And you keep that competitiveness out of it. And it's really to play with your sons. It's a great thing to do.
Yeah, it's a lovely
We've
thing
all
to
got
do.
sons in it. That's why we do it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel. Lots of you getting in touch about the state pension. I referred to it as a benefit, but it is a benefit. That doesn't mean I want to take it away or I'm going to campaign to take it away. It is, yes, you can argue, oh, paid into it.
I'm not sure you're going to win this with GB
I'm not
News.
going to win it. I'm not going to win it. But what I will say is I'm not trying to scrap it.
I admire
trying to scrap it. I think,
admire your persistence, I do.
Anyway, this is Dewbs & Co. I'm with Alex Dean, and of course, I'm also with Dr. Lee Jones, who's been with us since 6 o'clock. So we'll finish on a rather bizarre one. Now, last night at the Proms, there's usually a hoo-ha about the songs that are sung, that they're jingoistic or too patriotic and the like. That usually causes a stir. But this time, it's protest flags. They're being banned because audience members are being told that they might be confiscated if they decide to wave a flag of protest, a flag of hatred, and potentially other types of flags. But Alex Dean, what do you think they're trying to avoid here?
Sure. Well, consider the flag spectrum, right? I think there are some that are obviously OK. Our own, I hope, is the OK one.
Is that a protest flag?
The British flag, OK. And there are some that are obviously not. You know, ISIS flag, I think it's probably not going to be welcome at the Royal Albert Hall. I should make a disclaimer, by the way. Royal Albert Hall was a client of mine in the past, so not that I haven't prepared this flag spectrum, but I should point out I worked with them before. And then the question for them is what's in the middle. It seems to me what the Hall is probably trying to say, but can't say directly, is please no Palestine and Israel flags. I imagine that's what they are trying to say, but they're in a tricky spot. I rather preferred the last night of the Proms when it was just a sea of Union Jack flags, but of course the European Union obsessives went and spoilt that, didn't they?
Yeah, they really did.
Once that happened, all bets were off.
They really did, and one could argue that the EU flag is now a protest flag because we've left.
We're not in it.
So why would you be waving it unless you wanted to rejoin, which is, I guess, is some form of protest?
That's a protest.
But that's probably the truth, isn't it? They're probably trying to avoid some kind of confrontation between Israeli flag wavers and Palestinian flag wavers.
I think that's right. I mean, it seems like a kind of sensible security precaution to take.
So I don't think anyone's going to turn up with an ISIS flag, are they, really?
No, I think when they talk about a flag of hate, or they actually talk about prescribed organisations, which is clearly a reference to Hamas, which is regarded by the UK government as a terrorist organisation. So it's a reference to that. What they don't want is, you know, rival Israeli and Palestinian flag wavers, you know, coming to blows in the middle of rural Britannia.
You're far too reasonable. You're supposed to say, freedom of expression, anywhere is a place of protest. People should have the right to wave whatever flag, whether it's the Pride flag or the Palestinian flag or the EU flag.
The issue is, are the rules going to be applied equally? So if a protest flag just means a Palestinian flag, but it's perfectly fine to wave an Israeli flag, then people are going to say this is about suppressing freedom of speech, because some people are allowed to wave their flag and I'm not allowed to wave my flag. It's better to say nobody can wave any flag at a music event.
Apart from
the Union.
Hey,
there you go.
There we go.
Everyone's happy now.
I think that should be the rule. The only flag. I mean, would you allow the St George's Cross? I mean, that's seen as a bit of a flag of protest
I've always seen one or two Welsh flags and Scottish flags at the last night of the Proms. I wouldn't mind that either.
Oh, well, there you go. It can be of the nations that make up the United Kingdom or the Union flag. I think that's a good compromise, but I don't think they'd be as explicit as that on the website of the Proms. But there you go. We're going to have to end it there. Thank you very much for keeping the debate going this evening. It is, I'm not sure who's covering tomorrow evening, but it's been a pleasure nonetheless. Perhaps Dewbs is back, who knows? But yes, I've been Emily Carver. Dewbs is back. She'll be back tomorrow to be back on her show to host it. So until then, it is GBN Tonight with Christopher Hope this evening. So he'll be taking you through the next hour. I've been Emily Carver. This is Dewbs & Co.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good evening to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Plenty of showers as we go through tomorrow and some blustery, gusty winds too. But before then, there's a lot of cloud, there's a lot of rain because of a frontal system that's already made its way in from the west. And as we go through the next 12 hours or so, it's going to continue to push east and southeastwards, bringing quite a wet story across many parts of England and Wales for a time, with that rain feeding into the southeast as we go through the early hours of tomorrow morning. Behind it, there will be some clear skies around, but also some showery bursts, especially across parts of Scotland. Temperatures not dropping a huge amount. In fact, in the southeast, it is going to be another warm night, some places only falling to lows of around 17 or 18 Celsius. As we go through tomorrow morning, though, there will be some hefty rain across the far east of Scotland and the Northern Isles. Also, plenty of showers feeding into western parts of Scotland. In between, something a little bit drier and brighter for some, but also more showers across Northern Ireland, some parts of northern, northwestern England, and in fact down the western side of England and Wales, there'll be some showers feeding in. Something a little bit drier and sunnier for more central eastern parts of England, although in the far southeast, that front will be lingering here for a time, so a grey, damp start to the day for some before that front clears away by the afternoon. Behind it, for many, it is going to be a showery day, and some of those showers will be heavy, and there are some gusty, blustery winds to watch out for too, especially in the northwest, making it feel a little bit cooler for some. But there will also be some sunny spells, and in the east-southeast, in the sunshine, feeling quite warm with temperatures in the low to mid-20s. Wednesday gets off to a fine start for many of us, but some very wet and windy weather is going to feed in from the northwest as we go through the day, particularly affecting Scotland and perhaps Northern Ireland too. Now, the rain is going to be quite heavy and will last as we go into Thursday, and it's all due to the remnants of what was Hurricane Ernesto, the other side of the Atlantic. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems in Murray, just directly west of Keith Town Centre. The A96 has been closed on Regent Street. A building caught fire this morning outside the Grampian Hotel. Police remain on scene. On Merseyside, on the M57, the northbound entry slip road is closed at junction 23. You can't get off the motorway onto the East Lancashire Road. A tanker has rolled over. Recovery works underway. And in Norfolk, to the west of Kings Lynn, the A17 at Clench Wharton is closed following a serious accident. In Northamptonshire, north of Kettering, the A43 remains closed off the A14 following a serious accident. And on the Kent stretch of the M25, the two inside lanes of 4 are shared anti-clockwise just before the Dartford tunnels. A lorry's broken down, long queues back to the M20 at Swanley. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Don't miss out on your chance to win a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. It's extra cash that could really make a difference to your coming year. You could find yourself on that holiday you've always wanted to take, buy that treat that always seemed out of reach, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could be yours, but time is ticking. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Mark Dolan and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the